We're here with Daniel from Nigeria. We opened up this earlier presentation with two news flashes. One from the Midwestern United States. Nebraska and several other states were devastated with a bombogenesis cyclonic development. Essentially had the veracity of a Category 2 hurricane, dumping historic amounts of rain on top of already a lot of snow that impacted the region earlier, devastating the farmland and cattle and infrastructure in the region. Similarly, we've also seen these type of developments in Australia. We've seen them in Iraq. We've seen them in Africa. We've seen them in Latin America. And we're continuing to see these developments. We're here to talk with Daniel specifically about the African perspective, the Nigerian perspective, what's happening in Mozambique, what's happening in Zimbabwe, and what we can expect for the future. Thank you, Daniel, for being with us today. And please, first tell us who you are, where you're from, and why you're with us and what your message is.
Thank you so much, Antonio, for having me. And thank you, viewers, on this platform. My names are Daniel Chidubem Gbujie. I'm a Nigerian, currently staying here or living here in the United States of America. And I run a non-for-profit organization, what we call the non-governmental organization back home in Africa. So the organization tries to raise awareness about the impact of climate change. And we do it in a collective way, in the sense that we have ordinary members who are concerned about the future of their kids and how best we can explain what is going on currently. So we designed a platform or a protocol, how we engage ourselves. And somehow it has become a global platform or a mini movement, like they call it now, because we are presently having members from 169 nations across the board. And what we do is we bring on board our individual skills, talent, passion towards addressing, the issue of climate change, especially in vulnerable nations and vulnerable target groups like elderly women, children, people that are physically challenged, or people that have one impediment or the other. So basically, Team 54 Project is a not-for-profit organization that I run with a good support from 150 coordinators at the national level. And we combined have been able to frame the narrative on why we should do something, our own little bit, to addressing this scourge, this unbelievable phenomenon that we call climate change or global warming or climate disruption or total bizarre way the environment is responding to our carelessness.
Yes. So, Daniel, tell us first how you got involved in the topic of climate change, what first piqued your interest and got you concerned about the ongoing climate crisis.
Yes, that's a very wonderful question. And I still can remember vividly well that it all started with chaos and anarchy in my country, Nigeria. For your viewers that are not very conversant with the African continent, Nigeria is the most populous nation in Africa. And Nigeria is in the West African region of the continent. It is the largest in the West African region. It's also the largest with respect to population-wise across board. Now, over the years, growing up as a child, I've always noticed that those in the northern part of my country are usually what we call pastoralists or herdsmen. Now, in my country, we do not have the ranching system like we have in advanced nation. So there's this open grazing process or protocol, so to say, that have always existed for over 150 years. And most people in the northern part of my country are usually herdsmen or people that roam around with their cattle in an open field. Whereas those in the southern part of the country are usually fishermen, farmers, They're usually the more enlightened people. They go to school, they go to university. That's not to say the northern people do not have schools, but bulk of the educational institution that our country runs are all in the southern part of the country. So I've always grown up knowing fully well that headsmen reside in the northern part of the country. Sometime around 1992, then we started having all these conflicts, constant conflicts. And then by 2000, it had escalated. By 2009, it had become another thing. And then I got curious as a young doctor growing up, that why do we always constantly have needless deaths as a result of cows? It doesn't make sense, that people have to kill because of cows. What is making these headsmen move away from, their region that used to be known as the Sahel, and they are moving more closer to the coastal plains that are more tropical, more savanna-like in its appearance? And I later discovered that what is driving the transhuman migration along with the cattle is the deaths and the persistent droughts that had started in 2007. That is as a result of a 1997 El Nino effect. An El Nino effect is a sudden fluctuation, which is usually a normal presentation, but a sudden fluctuation in the temperature pattern that persists over a long period of time, causing very high temperature appearance. And this has been going on in my country, but of course, because we don't have advanced people that understand this pattern, and the meteorological stations are outside our own zone. Even those within our own zone run by our country are obsolete. So the predictions used to be very weird. It may rain, it may not rain, so you don't get the picture of what's going on. So, but the problem now was that the increase in temperature that has been taking place in 1992, 93, 97 to 2000 had caused famine, had caused persistent drought. It has now forced the occupants in the northern region to begin the journey towards the south. And these are some of the impacts that climate change will continue to cause. It will cause transhuman migration. People will be displaced even within their country, and because they need to survive, because livelihood is an important integral part of survival in Africa. They need to survive. They feed off from their cattle. Their cattle are their source of living. They sell the meat and make proceeds from there.
Let me ask, how many people live in Nigeria?
Currently, we have estimated now we have over 190 million people.
190 million people.
Yes.
That's absolutely incredible. And what is the Nigerian government doing in response to dealing with these increased droughts that are causing famines and destabilizing the population?
Now that's now where the complex and the unbelievable narrative usually is for Africa generally. The government seems to be disconnected with what is happening in the environment. And that's why we get to always hear very strange and funny things. The government seems to be more, their priority seems to be more on staying in office rather than carrying out the function of creating and protecting lives and property, rather than carrying out the direction that nations need in advancing and reaching sustainable development. So corruption, policies that are visionless has always been the bedrock of most African countries. And it's getting worse. It's getting worse because there seems not to be an understanding of how climate change is going to influence agriculture, which is considerably 90% of what most Africans, get to do. Whether it's plant-based or animals-based, you have something to do with agriculture. And climate change, will affect that. It's already worsening our health indices.
But before we get to agriculture, and we are going to have a good section on this about agriculture because that's affecting us all around the world. First, let's just talk about the in-your-face impacts of climate change. Mozambique was just devastated by a horrific hurricane that dropped feet of rain and created an inland ocean. Can you talk about the facts surrounding that disaster that just recently occurred? in late March?
Yes, I can. And it always starts, on a very sad note that Africa is often described as the continent with the most risk, most likelihood of being vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And it gets worse as these phenomenons become unprecedented and uncontrolled. And then again, the major problem is the lack of the capacity for African leaders and their governments to adapt or to even begin the process of, addressing through mitigation strategies the impact of climate change. So it is wonderful for me to come on board here to provide like an overview of what is known, what is unknown about the African climate future, and how best I think that we can help ourselves. So the incident that took place in Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe is something that is totally, completely regrettable. It's regrettable because the poor understanding of climate change in Africa, the lack of ability to even put in place disaster risk protocols that we normally see in advanced nations, which is also related with the adaptation capacity of any nation, totally fell apart. And again, it makes things more complicated because our region are already bedeviled with a lot of issues. Health is there, abject poverty, defined as every day once you spend $1.25 daily, it is said that you are under the category that is known to be abject poverty, and many Africans don't even have that amount to spend in a day, and it gets worse from there. So we have problems already that we did not handle well, and then we're now having a climate challenge that is beyond us. We have refused to understand the science of climate change and the need for us to adapt. So those are some of the things that made the cyclone worse. Now, I want people to understand this. The cyclone has always been have been a regular thing in some of these countries mentioned, especially in Mozambique and Zimbabwe. But the intensity and the power, the frequency of occurrence is what is unprecedented. So over time, it used to be a downgraded, low-graded Category 1 thing. But now it's just Category 2, but the devastation is unbelievable because there is no single thing put in place, you understand, to help matters. So let us start with why it got worse. There should be like an early warning protocol or early warning system that should put in place in all these countries. Take, for instance, when the polar vortex struck the United States of America last year, every single phone within the New Jersey area got an SMS alert 6 hours before the vortex. All the radios a week before had been told that a cloud and a gush of snow and ice will be coming the New Jersey way. Everybody stay out. If you are making any travel, stay away. Schools immediately sent alerts and schools were closed. Now, within the space of 1 week, there was already a total downgrading of all the activities that were happening within the areas that will be heavily impacted in. With that alone, only one death was recorded, not in the New Jersey area, outside some of the tri-state areas, in an area that covers almost 60 million people. Now, take for instance.
Let me ask you, Daniel, one of the obvious points of pushback is going to be is who's going to develop and integrate these systems for these countries if the countries don't have the capital to do it themselves? Is this something that you think is maybe should be part of the ongoing negotiations at Paris in responding to how to make it just and equitable transition when dealing with the climate challenge?
Now, that's a good question. And it's a good question because it's now telling us that climate change is a moral issue. So there are two sides that I will be able to answer that question with. The first side is this: whether we like it or not, Africans must build their own personal resilience. It is fundamental. You cannot force someone, to drink water from the pond. You understand, all the time. At some point, he has to make effort to swallow. You cannot force it down his throat. Africans need to build resilience, and building resilience is, you need to look at the peculiarity of your environment. You need to prioritize. You need to ensure that people, your scientists, your Ministry of Agriculture, your Ministry of Climate Change, are indeed investigating and finding out what is going on in the environment. That is key. Then secondly, I agree with you that advanced nations have handled Africa in a bad hand, and some of the pre-colonial mentality are still existing in all the African continent. And I will explain what I mean by pre-colonial mentality. Because of the years that African continents have been overrun by colonial masters, it has created a mentality for them to constantly depend. Even when they claim they are independent, they are still running to colonial masters for debt. They are even creating new colonial masters for themselves. And they are repeating the same thing over and over again without looking inward and asking themselves, how do we develop human capacity? How do we make sense of what is happening in the environment? Of what use should we be able to tell the world that we need as a problem? How do we achieve sustainable development? It's not enough to sign the Paris Accord agreement and not be able to even fulfill your commitments as a nation to that agreement, which no African country has been able to get that since 2015. So the point is this, that climate change is indeed a moral issue, because industrialization that took place 150 years ago put us where we are. And there's need for us to drastically change the system and slow down the capitalist mentality that tries to feed off human suffering to make profit. You understand? And then we need to, as an African, as the continent, or as Africa as a people, need to ask ourselves the truth, that there's no person that can develop the continent better than an African, because we understand the terrain, we understand the topography, we know who our true leaders are. So for now, we're having challenges with having good visionary leaders who are able to piecemeal understand how climate change impacts generally, and how the world, especially advanced nations, are gradually moving forward to greener economy, to greener financial principles, and to greener financial platforms, rather than us still trying to feed off from coal, feed off from active exploration of oil, known things that are already causing trouble. So the major challenge that we are going to have, and the major challenge in answering your question, is African leaders need to develop their own climate resilient system tailored according to the peculiarity in the region. And then the Western world need to have their fair share of transferring knowledge, of also ensuring they hold African leaders accountable. Don't give them loans to buy weapons. Don't give them loans to embark on projects you know fully well have no bearing with the realities of time. Why should an African government be thinking of opening a coal plant when the Western world is moving away from there? Why should an African government be thinking of inviting a tobacco company when the entire Europe have completely banned the tobacco? But they're all coming down to Africa, to create more pollution, to create more crisis, to create more problems. So
well, Daniel, I'm glad that you spoke on that, because I think a lot of Americans forget that, first of all, it's perfect that you mentioned the cigarette companies and the oil companies in conjunction. But here in the United States, we went through a huge battle for 40 years, 40, 50 years with the tobacco industry that was openly lying and denouncing science and employing a whole host of corporate lawyer tactics to try to deny the health effects of nicotine. And once they lost the battle here in the United States, that's exactly where they've gone, to the developing countries around the world, and to Africa, to Latin America, to China, to push their products there. And likewise, what we're seeing in the United States, well, first of all, the oil titans here are trying to hold their feet in the ground as far as they can. But where they are losing ground they are sure that they'll be able to export their gas, oil, and coal products to places like Africa, to places like Latin America, and they are trying to develop these infrastructures. And if these infrastructures are developed, they're going to be in use for not just 10 or 20 years, but we're talking about 30, 40, 50, 60 years, as long as these the lifespan on some of these infrastructure upgrades are. So what's happening in Africa in terms of this? How does it look? Are African countries moving to coal? Are they moving to gas? Are they moving to oil? Or do we see movement towards solar and wind and other renewables for energy generation?
Yes, thank you so much for giving a background perspective on the strategy that the oil company, the tobacco industry, and the executives used in the last 30 years to deceive a lot of Americans and to get them confused. That same strategy is what they're using back in Africa, because most of the African leaders, are entirely clueless. Those that are not clueless are already baited with massive corruptions, and that already beclouds their brain. It holds them, to the jugular. And when we have local activists that begin to agitate and raise awareness about what is really going on, they are either silenced or they are either killed. I want to bring of note what is happening in the Niger Delta area. Now, the Niger Delta area is responsible for 80%, if not 90% of oil that the country, Nigeria, depends on or sells to foreign land. I can assure you definitely that the last 30 years that the oil company exploration, especially from big corporate ones, I think Shell, Mobil, and Elf, the last active exploration that they have been doing have made matters so worse. As at 2009, when I happened to mandatorily go to the Niger Delta area to serve in my country, once you're done with your university, or you're done with, like a doctor as I was, you're done with your internship, your mandatory training for 1 year, you must serve, you must do like the Peace Corps arrangements and serve your fatherland. So it's compulsory that you are sent, to rural areas, or you are sent outside where you come from, where you go and then you practice or you serve or you help as much as you can, depending on your area of professionalism. Now, I happened to be posted to the Niger Delta area. And when I got there, it was unbelievable. I've always known that grasses are green. All I saw were black, charcoal-like, oily-like fields. I've always known that once it is 7, 8 p.m., it should be dark. All I was seeing were, gases being fled, methane being fled in real time. And it looks like it's 6 p.m. And I look at the time and it's 9. It's crazy. And then you could smell the pungent, very painful stuff. And then another phenomenon I noticed that whenever it rains, everybody seems to want to run away. Why is everybody running away? Say, no, don't let the rainwater touch you, because if it does, it's slightly corrosive. It can itch, it can scratch.
Yes.
And then I had a car then, a 2-door car, Toyota Corolla, very small, just 2-door, and I parked it outside of the hospital environment where I was lodging within the community in the Niger Delta area. And in the space of 6 months, I noticed that the car changed from black to something that looks like white, you understand? And I asked, what happened? And they told me that because you didn't cover the car, when it rains and the rain mixes with the methane or the carbon gases, it actually forms some bit of acid. The acid rain, as they call it then, drops on everything, whether it's leaves, whether it's grasses, whether it's plants, and then things are never the same. So my point is this, that the active exploration of oil, the activities of coal, the indiscriminate ways that corporate entities come in to cut down trees, so that they can build their shopping malls that we don't need in Africa, has led to an environmental disaster. So the Niger Delta area is the worst area ever. Even from the UNEP report, the United Nations Environmental Agency, made it clear that it will take at least 5 decades. It will take 50 years for there to be a cleanup of the entire area. So what it means is this, that people are already, their fates are sealed as much as possible. So now the problem is this, what is the government there doing? What have you done with all the money, all the oil money you have sold for more than 58 years of your independence? How have you saved? What are you doing to diversify? As you know, every other country, even United Arab Emirates that has oil, they're diversifying. Even Saudi Arabia, they're already planning big time on how to, enter into the renewable energy market. What are you all doing? Now, the narrative is this. There's little or nothing that is being done. Whatever is being done, they seem to be very overwhelmed by the challenges that they have seen. And then things get worse because some Western elements or some corporate elements, especially the oil companies, they know fully well that African continents are bedeviled with a lot of problems. You can settle and bribe their leaders and you can get away with a lot of things. They actually bring funds from United States and bring them to Africa, you understand, put in capitals, invest into other things outside their statutory mandatory things and create chaos and anarchy and some of the conflicts, that we see in the region. So some of my people feel that there's a global conspiracy to ensure that Africa still continue to be exploited in such a way that we never have the capacity to achieve, you understand, the sustainable development goals everybody preach. Secondly, they also have a way of manipulating our leaders, bribing them, lobbying them, holding them on their throats so that they compromise and never, create that future that our children, and their own children will be able to enjoy. So it's a complex thing of conspiracy. It's a complex thing of political intrigue. It's a complex thing of our leaders back in the continent, especially in Nigeria, not looking at the bigger picture of where we're going to be in 20 years' time.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the future and how the world is responding to this ongoing crisis. So in 2015, the world came together in one voice to pass the Paris Climate Accords, what Dr. James Hansen has described as a suicide pact. It was long determined, almost 1975, William Nordhaus had calculated that 2 degrees Celsius would be the uppermost limit that civilization could handle. And every day we're finding out that actually 1 degree is a lot more dangerous than we thought. 1.5 degrees is a lot more dangerous than we thought. So 2 now is considered to be catastrophic. Yet the current pledges at the Climate Accords has us going between 2.7 and 3.4 degrees Celsius, almost twice the disaster limit. And to make matters worse, that would be if countries were actually committed. And almost no countries are actually committed. The largest emitter in the world, China, now is promising to peak in 2030. The United States has walked away from the international consensus on climate change and collaboration with other countries on the issue of climate change. And Bolsonaro in Brazil has said that he's going to cut down every inch of the Amazon rainforest for the name of economic growth. So the world, I think, is now committed to no climate mitigation, no climate adaptation. To me, at least from my point of view in North Carolina, we're committed to not only catastrophic climate change in the near future, but the worst levels of catastrophic climate change. What does that mean for the people of Nigeria? What does that mean for the African continent? And how do Nigerians see what's happening in the West as we kind of are developing and leading the way on understanding climate science? We're also denying it.
Yes, you've raised a very important narrative that we are beginning to see in the last 2-3 years following the election of the new president in your country. And for us in Africa, Climate change is real. The impact has already been existing, like I told you, since 1997. We didn't understand it that way. We saw it like, oh, it's the normal weather. We just need to wait for the raining season. But now we are beginning to see that average temperature rise is not going down. It's actually increasing, and things are getting worse. So, but what you've been able to highlight, and that's what I want your viewers to be able to understand, is we are lacking leadership at all levels across the world. And it is very glaring. It is very glaring that global leadership is being threatened. It's very clearly that people are beginning to fail to understand the import of human life. I can tell you authoritatively, it appears as if we have just evolved. We are no longer humans. Humans are people that identify problems, that relate with problem, even if they're not directly involved, but some other people are involved, they relate with that. Sometimes they go out of their way and join them, you understand, but with a vision to pull people out from that region and then take appropriate action. That is what being humans are. All our lives, we've always evolved when we have problems that are just beyond us. Look at the bubonic plague. When the plague was ravishing the entire Europe and decimating the population in Europe, people didn't run helter-skelter. Oh no, let us just sit down and wait until we all die. Somebody somewhere said, let us find out the remote cause of this problem. Even if it's not happening in this part of Europe, let us know why entire population of Europe are dying. And they ended up trying to find out. They brought in the scientists, they brought in environmentalists, they went into the areas where deaths were recorded, and they discovered that rats. That was the beginning of the platform for how sanitation will take place. The importance of how to keep a clean environment began from. Rather than jump up and down and begin to peddle false news or begin to deny or claim the identity mantra that, oh no, we are denying climate change, people rose up to the challenge. But because we are having a distortion in the leadership platform across the world generally, we are now beginning to see people run amok. People say things that are totally bizarre. You know, even as an African, there are some things I hear American. I'm like, this has always been the nation where, when I was very little, just a few years ago, I always want to aspire to be an American. What is going on with them? And this is what Americans should be very careful about. The entire world are not talking. It means they are talking behind your back. It means people are beginning to strategize and are beginning to plan the downfall of an empire or a nation that has always been the watchdog for others. So it's important we know fully well that climate change is now forcing us, you understand, to define what leadership is. Climate change has exposed the fact that we are always, it's easy for us to talk, but we don't want to change. And we know that change is the constant thing in life, especially changing for the better. It's sad that now we are now refusing to change in the face of unbelievable and unprecedented stuff. So the failure of leadership or the absence of leadership has been a major thing. And let me tell you why I think it's leadership that has failed. You do remember during the nuclear missile crisis in America, when in the 60s, in 1961, couples were scared to go to bed because they felt by the time they wake up the following morning, there will be a nuclear one, they will all die. All it took was for two leaders, the US president then and Nicarita, the president from Russia, to come together and say, okay, let us step back, let us relax, let us look at how we can form a better understanding, let us resolve, let us keep all our buttons across. And they averted the nuclear crisis. So indeed, human beings, if given the right situation, if we get the right leaders, can actually do the right things. And I still do believe, just like many other Africans, young Africans like me, that are now beginning to see the impact of climate change. And then we are hearing that what we are experiencing is not climate change. That's wrong. You know, most of all the problems we are having in Africa with respect to climate change are not caused by us. We are the least emitter, the least. So morally, a nation that is always the bastion of human rights, of fairness, of equity. Is shying away from a known fact since 1972 that climate change and the direct link with fossil fuel are impacting on us. So for Africans, I feel you understand that we've been very matured enough, to even accommodate the fact that we are not the ones causing this problem. However, we're the ones not strong enough to withstand and prepare for it. So as an African, and for some of the African organizations that I have related with, they are very pained about what is happening, but they are very hopeful, because this has exposed the fact that we cannot depend on America. We cannot depend on the Western world, that we need to build our own climate resilience. We need to build our own kind of style. We need to ensure that our culture and some of our ways of lives that have negatively impacted the environment can be modified in such a way that it can be positive and eco-friendly things can be engaged. And we're doing a lot of that. For instance, now we are trying to ban plastics. You understand? Uganda is doing well. Rwanda already has. Even Rwanda has gone as far as having a day in a month where cars will not run. Cars driven by fossil fuel combustion engine will not run. You understand? Because these are some of the ways that we're doing. But Rwanda is just one nation out of 55 nations. There needs to be a synergy amongst the African nation. They need to come on board with a more robust resolution, you understand, to plead their case.
And challenge status quo. What I would like to say, adding to that, is I think it's imperative. If anything has taught us, there's been an immigration crisis occurring out of the Middle East and Northern Africa into Europe. I think as climate change is likely to be exacerbated into the future, we're going to see increasing numbers of Saharan Africans going north and out of the continent. And I think that if we want to avoid the great crisis of immigration and refugee, one of the things that Europe and the United States will have to do is recognize their emissions legacy, recognize their historical agency when it comes to climate emissions, and start paying out reparations to the world and helping these countries develop resiliency. And when I say help develop, I don't mean come in and plan it for them, but aid them where we can so that financing is not an obstacle.
Yeah.
Help teach engineering, help put in the vital infrastructure, because what we're going to need on this is like you say, we're going in the opposite direction today. What we see is countries in Europe are becoming increasingly more nationalistic. Countries in Latin America. To me, I'm a historian, and that's the approach that I take when I look at what's happening in the world today. And it reminds me very similarly to the conditions before World War I, and certainly the conditions before World War II. I mean, we are really talking about a breakdown of the international system. We're talking about the undoing, and you're speaking to that as well, but the undoing of the post-war consensus, the Washington Consensus, where the United States was kind of the lead country, the hegemon in the world, the top dog. And now climate change has pit us in the situation where it can't just be a desperate, competitive, capitalistic scramble around the world to develop countries, but we have to develop kind of synchronously and also sustainably. And we're headed it just looks like to me in the United States, as I'm seeing this, we're going mostly in the opposite direction. There's a Bernie Sanders phenomena, Tulsi Gabbard also coming out on this, and people like Liz Warren. But really the vast majority of politicians in the mainstream United States are not on board with any type of transition away from this. Before I end my comments and push it back to you, I would like to say that I don't think this is a uniquely Trump phenomenon. Under the Obama administration, we saw oil production increase by 88% over George W. Bush. Under the Obama administration, we saw the development of over 1 million fracking wells in the United States. We also saw the Obama administration open up the Arctic to Dutch shale twice. So we definitely seen under both sides of the political spectrum a move to worsen the crises. Obviously, one party is more preferable than the other. So the Democrats develop a clean energy plan that basically says we're not going to continue to subsidize certain coal plants that markedly wouldn't exist anyways. So they're going to take a market approach to phase out coal and increase natural gas. Whereas the Republicans say we're going to do all we can to keep the owners stacked. So tax cuts, and then of course we're also going to continue to subsidize large amounts of coal. And if we have to, we'll go to war with Venezuela to make sure that the Koch brothers can go send their crude to be processed, so they can process crude from Venezuela at cheap prices. So I don't know. When I look at what's happening on the scene in the United States, when I look at what's happening on the scene in even European countries seeking out places in the Arctic to set up shop, I'm not too optimistic about what the future looks like. I'm a little bit optimistic about China, even though they have a lot of their own pitfalls as well.
I agree with you, and you've highlighted. You see, another thing I've learned about the climate change discussion is that because it affects a lot of systems, it affects agricultural, it affects the health system, it affects socioeconomic, it affects the financing sector. Every of all these sectors that are affected all have their cliques, all have their stakeholders, all have hidden agendas that they do not want to tell the world. The bottom line on what you have explained is this: that people are making profit of human suffering. Again, it goes back to what I have said, that we have evolved as humans that do not exhibit the attributes of being humans. We've been more unhuman, or we are humanoids, and it's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate that we are becoming adults. As adults, we are becoming irresponsible because we are living a world that is battered to our children, and we are condemning their own children to a life of uncertainty when we know too well that they do not have the capacity. They're not the ones in the helms of affair. When we know too well that the number of years we have to be able to even get to the promised land, you understand, has been cut short. So it's sad that something that should be our moral obligation, we have jettisoned it to teenage people. We've jettisoned it to teenagers who are now telling us, by protesting and by going to the streets of Europe and by going to the doorsteps in the European Union and in the African Union, that they need to act. So it goes to tell you the kind of people that we have become. That's unfortunate. But the point is this, that there are simple solutions we can do. We already understand fully well that there's a connection between the way we have been running the economy, the way we have been depending and producing and consuming. We know that consumption dependent on fossil fuel related products and systems and services have brought us to where we are. So the solution is this: if we can stop what we have been doing, things will get better. But now the challenge is this: mankind is always very comfortable with something that is easy for him to do than for him to take up the challenge to look beyond, what is going on. And because it doesn't affect me, there seems to be this cloud of blindness all of a sudden. No, I'm not in Malawi. I'm not in Zimbabwe. It doesn't affect me. It's not going to come to me. And the truth of the matter is that whether you like it or not, what you see in Malawi is just the beginning. It's a grade 2 category hurricane that devastated 3 nations in 10 hours. It's unbelievable. So you can imagine when it becomes category 5, it means the entire of Africa will be finished. And things will get worse if we continue with the business as usual, if we do not diversify, if we do not move away from fossil fuel and start even thinking of other individual personal things. What stops us as 7 billion people to say, let us start planting trees? We already know that the solutions to bringing down the causative agent that is manipulating our environment. It's for us to take actions that are pro-environmental. It's for us to, rather than drive our fossil fuel car, take bikes. Rather than drive own 27 cars, do carpooling. Rather than depend so much on fossil fuel, look for solar units, look for solar patterns. It's important. We know that. But the challenge is this: because we are being constantly bombarded with adverts on TV, because there's a conspiracy to constantly muddle the water and create tension amongst people. Because again, some of us that understand better have looked down on people they claim to be climate deniers. We have looked down on them as people that are not so intelligent. That has fueled their anger against us. That has created bitterness and hatred. And again, as early scientists that came on board did not help us a lot. They pushed out information that is going to be doom, 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 doom everywhere. And then people just got scared. They didn't see the doom. And because the issue of climate change is a slow burning stuff. It's not something you see immediately. You understand, like the threat of terrorism. You don't see that immediately, but you know fully well terrorism is bad. But you don't see climate change, manifest and take people's lives like that. It comes and it goes. Maybe that's why we've been able to lose the vision. Now, what we do in Team 54 project that I think is key is this: we tell ourselves that everybody has something to bring on board. So if you're a musician, create songs. I'm writing 2 songs already on climate change in partnership with people from Indonesia. As I speak with you, sometime next week, I'll be presenting in Sweden. And I'm already designing an app that can help create early warning signals for especially Africans. You understand? They'll get the alert on their own phones system. So there are people in Africa that are designing bicycles out of bamboo sticks just to move around, since we know that mobility will be an important factor of development and progress. And then we cannot depend on fossil fuel car. Why not we deal on bamboo? Because we know that bamboo fully well has a way of sucking up oxygen, has a way of sucking up carbon dioxide, is resilient, you understand, if reinforced. And it can be used for so many things. It can be used to build houses. It can be used to get straw. The leaves can be used to make straws and things like that. So Team 54 project, rather than depend on the narrative that political parties are bringing, because people forget that political parties have agenda. Democracy has been hijacked. It is simple. And that's why Americans are bitter. I don't really blame Americans. They are bitter. They are angry. The years of political stuff has created nothing good for them. They work like hell and get nothing in return. They have no savings. You understand? Even the notion that somebody is tampering with your health is scary. It looks funny, but it's scary. You understand that the land of the free, the land that takes care of others, is contemplating on taking away people's health insurance on the grounds that they cannot run the government. It's unbelievable. It means that there's a problem going on somewhere. It means that whatever we have been running before now cannot hold water again. And the truth of the matter is this: even the military has already made it clear in 2007. You understand? The Center for Strategy and International Studies made it clear that climate change will worsen the security challenge we're having. Climate change will exacerbate immigration. That battle you think you are avoiding by creating the world is the least of your problems. Because by the time the entire Central America, by the time the entire Africa is completely disseminated, and then people start to move and plunge into the Mediterranean Sea and boarding the European Union in the shores of Italy, in the shores of Spain, in the shores of Monaco, then we begin to realize that there's a problem. And these things are there. It's just that it's unfortunate that we don't always speak to the better part of ourselves. When we have crisis, we always want to run away from our challenges. And I'm seeing hope in the generations that we have. So for us in Team 54 Project, we tell all our members that come with your skills and your talent. You have a phone, share, send messages to your country leaders and tell them that this is not acceptable. We can't continue to live our lives doing the same thing that has brought us here. You understand? It's called insanity. Einstein was right. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again that you know originally did not give you a different result, and you think it's going to give you a different result. That's called craziness. So over the years, in the last 30, in the last 50, in the last 100 years, we've been doing the same thing, depending on fossil fuel, reinventing fossil fuel. Now they're claiming that there's what they call clean coal. Now they're claiming that there's what they call clean gas, reinventing and trying to deceive and muddy the waters for people. You understand? And it's unfortunate. And the truth of the matter is this, and you said it, the tobacco company lied for 30 years to the American people that there was no link between tobacco and lung cancer. But now, 25 years after that, we know it's a lie, that millions of people died as a result of 7 corporate entities lying to the US Congress in 1994. This time in 1994, April 14, 1994, the Congress of the United States of America invited all tobacco company executives, the 7 of them, that come and tell us, do you agree that nicotine has a direct causative agent? They all lied to everybody until, of course, 7 years after the 1994 congressional hearing in 2003, the Surgeon General actually did confirm what the former Surgeon General in 1972 that was removed by Nixon, that's Dr. Steinfeld, who that nicotine is the direct causative agent of cancer. And they removed him, they lobbied and got Nixon to get him out of the rubbish team. Now he's dead, but he was saying the truth. Against all odds, he spoke up the truth. So we're happy that young people are speaking up the truth against all odds. You understand? But the most important thing that I think is lacking is that the individual role, the roles that each and every one of us can play, is much more powerful than the role that the government can do. Don't get me wrong, government have sweeping powers on our lives. But the truth of the matter is that if we are all united, if we switch off our lights when we don't need to use them, if we convert our bulb from the watts, the electric bulb, to the LED bulb that can save light, save consumption, save us cost. If we walk instead of driving car, the shortest mall that we need to go, if we bicycle, if we live right, if we diet well, these things, if we do it as millions of people, it will lead to a lasting impact. And there are some things that I think the African continent need to take into consideration. That the world is not going to wait for anybody. There are no freebies again. That nations are already struggling to take care of their own people. So they're not looking at taking care of you. And the earlier that Africans realize that, the better for us. Then the message that I think we should be sending to Western world is this. At some point, you should just have compassion. At some point, you should have a heart. That you have put most African country, you have threatened the existence of mankind. And people forget so quickly why dinosaurs got extinct. Dinosaurs were the biggest beast on earth. Dinosaurs had more muscle than me and you combined. They were the biggest animals. Everybody ran away from them. But the reason why they got extinct is because they refused to evolve. They refused to change. There were lots of volcano eruption, lots of things going on in the world. Weather patterns were changing. Man was moving away from conflict regions. Man was moving away from places that were not too favorable for him. Man moved away from Africa, started spreading to Europe, came down to America, went to other parts of the world. But dinosaurs remained where they were until when what happened? Catastrophe started, volcano eruptions started, floodings and all those kind of things that happened in those days, and they become extinct. Guess who the next big animal is on stage? It is us. We're at the top of the food chain now because there are no dinosaurs again. Every other thing below us is extinct. This is the first time, this is the generation that is seeing an extinction of animals that we should depend on. Butterflies are going. Insects are almost gone. My kids will not see some certain rhinos again. The only surviving white rhino will die. I did not even get to see an elephant. And I'm in my 30s because all the elephants that I could see had been killed. So it's going to get very tough to explain who we truly are as human beings to our grandkids. It's going to get very tough. And this explains why we are very animalistic, we are very unreasonable, why we keep on fighting ourselves. Because if we cannot take care of human beings, how are we going to take care of animals? If we cannot respect Mother Nature, how are we going to respect ourselves? So climate change has exposed one thing, and I want every American to hear me clearly, that we are hypocrites. We agree and we know fully well that change is the only constant thing in life, and changing for the better seems to be the progress in moving forward. But we have refused, to come together and ask ourselves critically. We've refused to speak truth to power. We've refused to tell ourselves that we can do this. You understand? That we can harness the power of the sun. We can harness the power of the wind. We can harness the power of water. That we can change our agricultural practices in Africa. We need to tell our African government that planting agricultural practice has nothing to do with you cutting down trees. Tree cutting is a no-no now. Those practices that tend to make the environment more disastrous should be done away with. We can do hydroponics now. Having soil is not a condition for you to practice agriculture, because hydroponics exists. Planting without even soil. You understand? And it's doing very fine. So all we need is for Western world, especially all the international agencies, to start to have like an assessment model. So you as an African government, you as an American government, we are going to assess you. Which of you have been able to meet the requirements? For you to come to our platform and speak and address the world on the United Nations, you must be able to score the following things. How many people have you lifted out of poverty? How many people have you blessed? How many of your citizens did you move out of the poverty line? How many of them can feed? You can't just come to the United Nations as the president of Cameroon and you say a lot of funny things that are not on ground. Your people are totally confused. You've been in power for 28 years. You kept on doing the same thing over and over again that has not yielded anything. You are the president of Zimbabwe. You do not have an alert system. You do not have risk management or risk protocol things when environmental conditions happen, knowing fully well since 1992, knowing fully well since 2012 in Rio de Janeiro that the climate change issue had been discussed. All governments that are currently existing have documents to support that climate change already has been an issue in the last 55 years. So coming to tell people that you don't seem to understand where it is where our problems are. So in moving forward, I think what we need to do is we need to go back to our roots as human beings. We need to start to ask our question, what will we be remembered for? So I do know fully well that you had a president called Abraham Lincoln. You had a president called George Washington, who never told a lie. My daughter always told me that. You had presidents that stood up, you understand, for the people. They laid their lives, they laid the price for what every single person here is benefiting. It's now time for every American, for every African, for every European, for even those in the Pacific region. And this is where it's painful. Did you know that there's already a projection that sea level rise will increase more than 1 meter by the end of the century, or about the end of the century? Are you aware that in Kiribati, that some lands, any sea level rise greater than 0.5 meters means that already land fields will be taken over with? Kiribati is already looking at even relocating. It's that bad. Climate change will define what nationhood would be. Nationhood will no longer be, this is where I was born. It will not be defined by that. It will be defined from the context of climate change, where it's not where you are born, it's where you are existing as at that time. And then that will be very, very disastrous for us. So in moving forward, I think the solutions is that we just need to see how we can use technology that we know now, how we can expand on it, how we can help African country, train them, how they can also develop their own community-based climate resilience system, how we can help, NGOs get better, how we can understand and change our agricultural practice, how we can change our financial system. It's an area where nobody's talking about, because fossil fuel drives The fossil fuel economy is what drives the capitalist mentality that we have now. The capitalist mentality indeed has created wealth, has created prosperity for advanced nations. But under that prosperity and wealth, it has also created the problems that we are seeing now. It has created greed. It has created conflicts. It has created all manners of funny things. And the truth of the matter is that if we must move forward, we need to now redefine what true governance is. We need to now write a template, a charter on what it feels to be a government, what true governance will be. True governance will be that system that respects or tries to build a bridge between the environment that we see and the aspirations of those individuals that habits the area or the region that the nation or the governing influence will try to control. So trying to marry environmental expectation with our need to exist and survive sustainably will be what true governance will be defined in the future. And I'm so happy for Team 54 project. I'm so happy for the international organizations that are working with us, like the Let's Do It World. The Let's Do It World is one of the international organizations that are saddled with eradicating plastic all over the world. They are the custodian of the World Cleanup Day. They choose a day in the month of September to clean up plastic from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. We have another organization called Pavati. Pavati is also a non-profit organization in Canada that raises awareness about what is happening in the Arctic region. They're trying to develop a treaty. The treaty that says that we want to make the entire region of the Arctic sphere a peace sanctuary, a park, where no person will go for active military experimentation. Active oil drilling will have to end so that aquatic lifestyle can rejuvenate and regrow, so that we can, step down this fan belt of trying to explore oil and create a lot of chaos. There are many other organizations that are doing fantastically well. And Team 54 Project, being a non-for-profit organization, has this way of fusing and developing content, ideas that can help whoever is coming into our group feel that sense of belonging, feel that it's part of something much bigger than itself. And that's why we have expanded in just over 2 years. We have expanded as big as we have now. And we have a following of over 200,000 with an active members online that are doing wonderful job in their own little way across board. Another important thing I also want to stress that Americans should know is this. If we do the simple things over a long period of time, we create a culture. It is because we've not been doing those simple basic things as individuals over a long period of time. We have no culture. We have no culture to respect the environment. People continue to ignore the reality, and that's what destroys empire. You do know that the Roman Empire, you understand, has always been a very strong empire because they have regard for what is present. They have also regard for what is in the future. They use the same energy for the challenges in the present to also attack the challenges in the future. Even they have gone as far as even saying that every issue that they are going to handle must be handled from a consciousness that they need to intervene as early as possible, because it's always easy to remedy things when you intervene early than when you see it, ignore it, pretend, create political spectacle, and then we now start to experience it in real hand. It becomes too late, it becomes incurable, it becomes difficult to address. So in moving forward, we just need to sit back, slow down, reappraise where we are coming from, ask ourselves the question: America 150 years ago and America now, where are we?
Well, thank you, Daniel, so much for the exploitee there. I think we had a great conversation. I'm going to open up the floor for a couple of minutes to our viewers to ask any questions. Our first question comes from Sandy Shalas. Daniel, are you familiar with Jim Bindell, positive deep adaptation?
Come again?
Are you familiar with Jim Bindell, positive deep adaptation?
Okay. I'm not familiar with Jim Bindel, but I'm familiar with the adaptation strategy. And that's the only likely approach that Africa can use, because we don't have the financial muscle for the mitigation strategy. But this is where the problem is. The problem is this, that the adaptation and the mitigation strategies must be used in combined if we're going to achieve anything. It's just like someone has diabetes. The major way to treat diabetes is, one, ensure your dietary lifestyle needs to change, and then also take your pills from time to time. Now, you keep on taking pills and you do not want to change your dietary lifestyle, you're still going to be left with the illness. So the adaptation strategy is what most African countries, smart African countries, are currently doing, but it's not good enough in addressing our immediate problem. I'll give you another example. Something happened in my own part of the world. Now, there was flooding sometime about 2-3 years ago in an area in my country. And then the farmers there got very upset. They started killing themselves. They had gotten loan to buy hens, chickens, and then flooding came. Hens can't swim in water. They all got destroyed. And I reached out to them. I said that this thing is climate change related. That what I think we need to do is we need to change the cultural norm on how we rear our animals. Why not we think of rearing ducks? And then one of them said, no. In our culture, we cannot have ducks. No ducks, no ducks. And I told them that in your culture, people like this shouldn't be committing suicide. People are committing suicide because they took loans from banks to rear hens that they will sell off. But rain came, not prepared, no prediction, and killed 1,000 fowls. Do you want people to continue to commit suicide? Is it part of your culture? And they sat down and said, oh my goodness, he's making a point. Committing suicide is not part of our culture. So we need to adapt. And they immediately adapted, and they started rearing ducks. I started telling people that ducks can also produce protein just like hens. But the problem is that there's a forecast that rains will not stop and that these rains will get worse. And the truth of the matter is this: 5 years after that time, the rain did get worse, destroying more things. But however, no ducks drowned. They still have their livelihood there. They still could sell the ducks, you understand, make money and survive. So the point is this, that adaptation is indeed a very important strategy, or is one of the ways that Africans are currently using. But it should not be the end result. The end result is the combination between adaptation and mitigation strategy. And by mitigation strategy, we mean any of the system or the process or technology or the advancement that can reduce the carbon dioxide emission, or that can reduce the volatile gas emissions, that can trap them, slow them down. That will be able to help Earth replenish, regenerate, and become more productive. So the adaptation strategy is indeed a very important thing, and that's one of the reasons why I need to appreciate the Cornell University. The Cornell designed a platform, a fellowship, to bring in different arrays of people with experience in environmental discussions and negotiation from vulnerable communities on board a platform. Then they now begin to train these wonderful environmentalists on how to socially influence people, celebrities within their own region, to be able to join the climate stuff, on how to do social marketing, how to communicate effectively, you understand, especially using languages peculiar to the region, you understand. So the Cornell University Fellowship, which I am part of, I'm one of those fellows too, I'm part of, and I'm very grateful for all I have learned. How I now know fully well what the messaging will look like. When you are discussing with a climate denier, you don't need to pull him down. You don't need to become more animalistic, more condescending, more belittling, more disparaging. You just need to show love. You must be able to relate with people at the weakest point, even in their ignorance. Find a common factor. There has to be a common factor among everything, even in those that you don't even share the same faith with. And that's what Team 54 Project is doing. Most of our members have different kinds of faith, but we are all working together, to develop even an interfaith protocol on how we are going to address climate change. So Cornell University is setting the pace. You understand? And we expect other universities like Harvard, like Oxford, to begin to now scout. They already have this knowledge-based understanding of what the climate science is. Reach out to the vulnerable communities. Look for outstanding young people, outstanding leaders amongst them, NGOs them, bring them on board, show them easier likelihood of how to adapt and how to move forward. And yes, one of our viewers raised a very important issue we hide away from: population. I know it's a very thorny issue, but the truth of the matter is this: population cannot be ruled out of why we are becoming more monsters. We want to consume things. It's because there's a ready supply of things. So there has to be a discussion. There has to be a discussion on how we can better organize ourselves as humans, how we can either train ourselves mentally on what we need. You don't need certain things. I have a certain dress that I've been wearing for the last 2-3 years. I'm not going to change. You understand? Once my furnitures are broken, I have to repair them. I'm not going to buy new ones. If you check my house here, you're not going to see state-of-the-art facilities. No. You understand? The need and the rush for us to be trendy, for us to use what is in vogue, what is reigning, has also fueled our consumer nature. And sadly, in Africa, we are always lacking in everything, and we are not really at par with that. But some wealthy African nations are beginning to tour this part of the Western world, who believes that luxury means life. No, the joy and the benefit that we gain from life are always how we are able to impact on people and create a positive, sustainable future for our kids.
And Daniel, I think that was wonderfully said. We're going to end the program here. We want to thank our viewers again for tuning in to this most important message and perspective from the African continent, from Nigeria, from Daniel. We thank you, and we would be more than happy to have you on in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. And I want to leave on this note that we have simple solutions to our problems. Yes, climate change is a serious thing, but it is solvable. All we need to do is work together. All we need to do is appeal to our human side. All we need to do is start to do our own individual action to ensure that life is better for our children, their children, and for mankind. So thank you all for having me. It's been a wonderful discussion, and I really pray that things get better. I think things are going to get better. I'm hopeful for the future ahead.
All right. Thank you so much. This is Antonio Reid again doing another episode of Environmental Coffee House, and our guest, Daniel. Thank you again.